Well, đây thì mình đâu nói
Yeah, đúng rồi. There. Oh. Hey, hey, what? Maybe
it's not
go
hurting.
that way as well.
Is that better?
Cái này cái mic là nơi cái mình
Do it okay, man.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Nhưng mà chấm nó toàn thông của mày đó. Thông vậy. Mình chấm mày đấy, biết gì chấm. Nó còn có lips. Rồi.
Gerobache, good morning. Shopadele Kukamsang. Ani, good morning, Katrina. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to our online participants as well. Today is the final teaching in this current series, but Gen Rinpoche will resume teaching this text in December, so fear not, look out for that information. And in the meantime, if you would like to make an offering in gratitude for the teachings, you'll find information in the chat box about how you can do that to continue to create the causes for us to enjoy these marvelous teachings. And now we'll begin with some prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, for destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom motion like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path of freedom too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame, and a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, for land, sun, and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Iram Guru Rana Mandalakam Niyatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
딕성겐라.
뭐야? 어디서? 어디가 지종가 뭐 준비 송래로? 신의 년주를 매지 땡매지 살아. 신의 년주를 매지 땡매지. 대인지 군주 섬동에. 디시리 깜도 신도 땜바다 대랍전 양반 매바샤. 대한 까나는데 렉삼네 란도 최시 쪽으로 알레소스. 시송바다. 신의 년주 매지 땡매지. 당가라서 상마도 예바도 시고야 장로. 땐도 대요 말와 되고 무슨 체주라 상마. 네버리쇼스. 대텐데티요 말와 남생님이 시외시 아니 최마도 생각하게 잠에 뱀바셔라. 어디인데 가서래. 네버치와인데 네버도 신디치부터 다 많이 봐. 신디다 치면 신디 대신 치면 뱀배는 최시 쪽으로 해서라. 영화에서 그 자와치 쪽으로 해서 쪽으로 생기 삼을 땅다 가네까지 셰당 레지 최바 kir당 어때서 아니 상부체 네바 방바치고 그래서라. 신의 년주 매기 때문에 년주스도 그 년주다 된주세 년화이다 된주도서 교황 년바스 사담이 교화도서 교화 상부 된주스 이시여라. 어디 신의 년주 매기 때문에 년화를 깨마게 기마를 삼베 소소소소를 땡수게 요마라 다주에게 요마라 근데 땡 여버치 최고를 했어라. 신의 년주 매기 땡매지 땡 여버 건데 최고로서는 근데 아주 근데 주주 송도와 다량도서 뭐도 당일이 얘기나네 지단 매개와 주방배 주진미시가 와라 남중간 주시대 어디에 가르스네 된도 레벨 하다 미다 대술라 계약이 건도 전시기도 와 다 주주 시대서 델레하고 저 소당 소미를 깨와라요 삼대진 의시다 소미진 의시도 더보라 대저시기도 와 주주 시대 매개와 주방받지 대강이야 아니 대가서래 처음에 동화하세요 라 처음에 동화 아니 되네 수답돼. 메시게다데 양답에 소화체 디치시에도와. 되네고 샹라 차와방바스. 지다 미기주나네 샹라 차와방바시데 누구여라. 대인한데리 미기주나네 납신 내심 로타투서 그 미기와선다 장가타라. 단단 딜이야 가서래. 릉하게 꺼내 뭐서 차와친게데 릉하게 된데로와. 디시에도와. 남밤에서와 셰. 아니 조금 줘라. 대간에 주두시제 숨들이야. 아니 침발라 소바트스 침베 내가나. 아니 그베 침바스 그 신세서로. 그베 침바스. 아니 되네 가서래. 그 진짜 최셔바시도. 최해바라게 아니 다르도 좋아하네 캠볼라 소바 최생결 소바가리나. 다르게 텐션이 가서 또 소리야. 최바로 해봐. 야. 최셔바시. 근데 잠바스도 잠바스도 다디 잠바 채미시리 시에요라 채미시리 시에도 그 채미도 또라 삼dengi 무시 도고야라 삼dengi 무시 도고라 어디내시 삼dengi 무시 마토는 삼den 순간발할게 요마로 소미기 무시 마토는 소미게 요마로 어때서 원도전이 시에요라 주두시에도 사마 어디질람이 마운다서 야
No. So here, as Lama Tsongkhapa has said, there is no certainty that after death we may not be born in the lower realms. The protection from such terror lies in the three jewels alone. So we must make firm the practice of going for refuge and ensure that its precepts are never undermined. This, in turn, depends on contemplating well the white and black karma and their effects, and on perfect observance of the ethical norms. So here, as it says in the first line, there is no certainty that after death we will not be born in the lower realms. And so here, this is getting at the fact that our death is something inevitable. We have to face a certain death, although the time of our death is uncertain. And really, the only thing that can be of benefit to us at that time of death is the Dharma. We need to think beyond just this life and engage in a kind of practice in order to ensure that we have good after we pass. The Dharma is something that is beneficial in this life, but really its ripening results come in our future lives. And so we need to use our three doors, our body, speech, and mind, in a good and a positive way, eliminate those kinds of negative actions of body, speech, and mind, in order that we create the conditions to have a happier migration. Of the two options, once we die, we can either go to a happier migration in the upper realms as a human or a god, or in the lower realms as a hungry ghost, a hell being, and an animal, and so forth. But if we just sort of act, however, we can't have any kind of certainty where we are going to be born. So we need to comport ourselves in a way such that we can have confidence about where we will go after our birth, after our death. And so here, as we have been discussing above, are the 16 dharmas for giving high status or a good rebirth after we die. And so the main of those are abandoning the 10 non-virtues, but as well, there are 6 additional activities that ensure we are born in the higher realms. And here, normally that includes humans and gods, but also in this are included then the material and immaterial realms that are on top of that. So in addition to abandoning the kind of 10 non-virtues as listed, there is giving up alcohol, intoxicants that make us act in unruly ways, and having a right livelihood, the way that we sustain ourselves being in accordance with ethics. And then there is non-harm, as in all of those kinds of activities. I mean, we have the negativities of our mind, like having covetousness and malice and so forth, but harm or violence in this context is when our body and speech take on that aspect and we treat others with that kind of violence. So abandoning any sort of that with our body and our speech. And then there is engaging in generosity, respectful generosity, giving to others with a kind of a respect and reverence for them. And then there is making offerings to those who are worthy of offerings, whether it is our preceptors or our teachers in the context of a monastery, say, or any who are worthy of receiving offerings, to engage in that. And then there is the practice of love here, which is really included within the four immeasurables. And to actually achieve the four immeasurables, we need to attain not just the kind of preparation, but an actual meditative concentration, not with the aim of being born in that meditative concentration. But so here, the practices that are subsumed within those 16 dharmas, 16 phenomena for higher rebirth or higher status, are what we need to practice in order to give ourselves some kind of confidence about where we will be born.
뭐야? 신의 연주 매기 땡미시라. 신의 연주 매기 땡미시. 대인지 육군조 숨도 내셔라. 단지 벌레 좀 갱게 겹티 가르스는 군조 숨들에 셔라. 대 산계 군조 최던 바보데. 랍제 덤바보데. 직바들레 겹에 탑디데레세. 로 내선레 계시 균데레세. 사담멜레 계시 균데레세. 산계가 겹던 거라. 겹던 바보 산계세. 겹무데 템베 최데로와. 템베 최 다 단단한 달이야. 그래서 그니 셰랑원도 주주 셰르바. 미게 주봉하다 디간리아 최신다 주주 셰서 어떻게들 최대 최를 겹서 채워서 되네. 겹원에 된가 되게 겹그래 대치긴 해서요라. 겹던 바보도 산계로와. 산계가 겹던 바보이 마동네 ken주 동네도 봐. 락베세 신다체 그 메탑시티 인송거랑 엘랭게티 인송거라. 디신식 봤던 바데 시베 송고 쮸제 람게니 케자 남바 댄세. 디신식 봤던 바데 케자 남지 자고 소송도 어디 산계게 ngarabi nyamyongge yeba kanga shimbate kiranto ten yese tishinshik ba lenge de kyapten bobo de ese mado tishinshik ba kanga tunge kanga mevase tewa kanga pa lakbe trebane shite yo mara jiten cheba bo yobane shimaro nambachena ten du kasera kyamwe de chödere de ora ten ji yukunju somdonge chökunju ose ne kyapdruben da rodelia 규율적인 로 현대 추중께서 커미야 다시 텐데치도 kon중아 텐데치 오르스 kon주 따그데 kon주 랍설 얘기는 게 전에야 아니 겹주변 다로 추주변 지소시어라 될수요라 고대야 진짜리오래 어디 인도 가서 밴드 빼자는 송구와 그냥 매체 나네 소긴 직배 소체변 직배여나 아니 다 나서들 자야 된다 그 나서들 나서 마신이 지그네로 ene ko captain babo amji jaga dura nazo de karina ti try tapsi karina sam member che segre member de chene member de ta kera nazo de rese menji tegra mendi de so gore treden de che gore shira o ti kemone de ta nazo le kebe kemone de tera menderwa mado amji de ko benan jun che se marwa la be ser na shi mare o ti de mendi kemone de to 니가 치워내 줍시 겹대. 겹드면 다로스도 건 나서요. 내가 지금 교육생 매든데 사고를 티디스가 뭐 쇼게 사고를 니무 사고를 건다 사고를 남게스도 어디 나시 산제 겹대 바보 그러와 내성게 동네를 겹대 바보 겹무에 미그 주본 게 주좀 야 아니 뭔데 그 주주들이 겹무에들이 겹주변 다도 뒤통변이 커미야다 제서 현다도 들어와 대졸 땡거래 예성구도 대인지 군조 숨동네 땡네바리 텔레션요 말에서라 야
So the second line then reads, the protection from such terror lies in the three jewels alone. So who is it that can protect us from this kind of situation? Well, it is the three jewels, the Buddha being the teacher of refuge. He is the one that teaches us, that shows us, oh, this is the cause of taking birth in the lower realms. This is the cause of the higher realms. This is the cause of liberation and so forth. So the Buddha is the one who teaches the kind of instructions of refuge, but the Dharma is the actual refuge, is our actual protection. If we engage in certain activities, like taking up those 16 dharmas for higher status, that is what will actually protect us. So as the Buddha has said, the Tathagatas, those who have thus gone, teach the path to extinguish samsara. They teach how to get out of it. But you are the one who has to do that. You have to actually take up the practice yourself. So it's not like a kind of a situation with a creator God where they could somehow give you liberation or give you a kind of freedom, but rather it is on the basis of the advice given by the Buddha that we then have to take up that advice into practice, which is our actual refuge. And the Sangha are like the companions along the path with us. We look at them, we observe what they are doing. They help give us advice and encouragement. It's sort of like the society of those that are practicing in order to benefit us in proceeding along the path. So like the example that is often given, if you are in fear for your life because you know that you are sick, you think, well, I need to seek out a doctor. So you're scared. You go find a doctor to be able to give you a diagnosis of what is going on. And the doctor then says to you, oh, you need to take this medicine. You need to eat this. You need to act like this. And it is that actual advice that is going to be of benefit to heal your illness. It's not as though the doctor is like able to go into your body and be doing it with his hands or something, but rather it is based upon the doctor's advice that we then take this medicine and we follow the course of treatment in order to recover. And so too, the nurses, the kind of it's like the Sangha, are those who are there to give you kind of encouragement, help you to follow the advice. Okay, you need to take this medicine now, you need to eat this now, and so forth, in order to be able to help you to your healing. And so it is the Dharma, those 16 phenomena or 16 dharmas for higher status that we need to practice, we need to actually implement in order to be our protection.
뭐야? 뭐 뒤에도 맞아. 기부 중을 시샤를 시샤비너로. 드네 녀송기 동네를 좀 하다미 대화 도바자고 요라. 대한 추주베 대 단다랑 그 추주번나시 마오바나 추데 공내 공도 야제베 야 균투니 체투에 된다리아. 아니 산제기 템바에 베기 밀루 대화자된 조라 주상베 밀루 치토바 체도네. 가서래. 단다 어디 규슈슈주들을 넣고요라. 텔레롬네 다던다 땡큐를 지제고요라. 니링니리 메제나 말한저 대시다 개침부터 말아. 간에 깨지셔나 참마셔나 치두셔나 제탈 그봐. 테네 참마치도 가게. 계속 배 쳐달라도 기타지 진조시다 지금 말아 텔레 나가지야. 공마도 바지야 전부 뜻이 삼당이라. 어디지도 가가강한테 말하면 야따를 줘야 삼루땅에 소리 차고와라. 어디 일이 몇잖아. 철레께서 채워시도자 매기 쪽방보다 아니까 소리. 최주로서 뭐티야 캠버시 드링이 말이야 되던데 조금이 되던데 방기 삼루땅. 이렇게 교아침마대 하담이 최주배 때 캐버리센지 토베 교리 삼산다. 그러. 텔레라고 텔레 최주네 더도 다루다 탐지kimba tuktuba shigi samsa tendefa kyulango chene ni nyiri mesenal tike chembo imbata chi chigi be ngone chedi tedi chigi wara inga zo te memba chaya chedi shenda chi zoro che tende sam koten mandirto o tedi tenkeba chi che ure shere tatunda tenkeba de dandana she samluta 근데 주주도 nyiri 메즈나 samluta chole capsa chu ta de nga cap gre sam nge son le cap gre la da mil ke gre sam chudu be ten ke bar che le ya to ba che tu gre sam sa che 근데 chen de le de ya bo chang na kyo thoma me ban sa shi be le mang bu yong gra kyo nga ma sa shi be le mang bu yong gra o mi ki chu la so ba o da te chudu te su dang ge we mi ge mang bu sa yo ro te zol pa 샤바체부터 딜 샤바체는 마도 첸딜 마사나 교앙아멜레 투침부터데니야 되게 온거도 상아르사베 미게벨레 토솔레 개바체 심변레 체베 그래서 교가 미게 줄레서 보다 어떤데체 레 첩침부마 무사요레섬 Ti mandi bari sam ti tunda le ni chi cha che wa da choba pyo da dumba dunya le soba tungsha dunya soba tinde mambu yora. Gyosim che ne tunda. Mandi re sam simja le chawa tinde mandi re sam. Chamba da nyingji ya shwe de. Simja le chawa che ne neba che ne tikba sabi yora. Tinde chamba da simja tamze le ya tinde tewa da trendu ki chamba. Tunga da trendu ki chawa le soba o ti komne pa. Samlu tangi ne tinde tikba mambu tandu ura. O ti samrutane ta tenke ba chegure sungyara o ti chilamya.
So here, if we approach this from the kind of perspective of a being of lesser capacity who is striving for higher status, even if we are thinking beyond that, in order to continue to pursue the path, we need to gain again a birth like what we have right now, with all of the kinds of the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments to be able to continue to practice the Dharma. And so in order to do that, we need to take up the practice of these 16 dharmas for higher status, abandoning the 10 non-virtues, doing these other kinds of positive activities. But this is something that we often don't see as very important in the course of our day-to-day life. We think, oh, I'm doing Dharma, but then as we are, say, talking with others, we lie, or we say harsh things, or we say divisive things without really thinking about that. We don't recognize it as something that is part of our Dharma practice. So in a day-to-day kind of way, we need to actually, when we say, like, I go for refuge to the Dharma, this is actually saying, I'm going to do this. I am going to abandon all of these non-virtues. I am going to abandon harm toward others. And this is for the sake of being able to ensure that I have a good rebirth in the future, in order to be able to ultimately pursue those goals of liberation and the state of omniscience. So sometimes we might have this idea that the practice of Dharma is something else. We like kind of live our lives going through our day, interacting with others, and somehow the Dharma is some practice apart from that. But that's really missing the point. The day-to-day practice of actually implementing these 16 dharmas of higher status are something that are going to prevent us from going to the lower realms. This is how we can gain certainty. We can gain confidence in our not falling into such a situation in the future. This can ensure that we have a good rebirth in our next life. And in addition to practicing that kind of ethical conduct, implementing that dharma day to day, we also have those many non-virtues that we have accumulated since beginningless time, all of the ways that we have caused harm to other sentient beings, and by paying some attention to purifying those through the practice of having a kind of regretting those actions that we have done that are harmful to others, and as an antidote to that, engaging in things like prostrations or recitations of the confession of downfalls, or saying mantras and saying prayers and so forth. These can act in a way to purify those negativities that we have accumulated, and in particular the kinds of actions that we have done that are harmful to others. Having a feeling of love, particularly for other sentient beings, developing love and compassion for them is a really powerful way to purify those, by recognizing, may all sentient beings have happiness, may these beings have happiness. We are able to effectively really purify those kinds of negativities that we have accumulated since beginningless time, and have some kind of confidence in our next rebirth.
Oh yeah. Oh, they do that all the people chung general. Oh, the Jimba Sudim service of the Toyong Guada. Jimba said the local Sansengi Jimba, the long Jew Chimbo Yong, Chima, the director. Sendil Shan Pemba to Yashitu Jimba Yongura. Jimba the long Jew Chimba Samayba, Chuji Chimba, Sansen Chimba, Chuji Chimba. Mijik Chimba said the Mambo Yongua. Oh, Shan Kangi Yoga, Sogi Jikba, never China, watching the member of Soba. Oh, to the Mijik Chimba, this how much so Chingivara. Kigenda General Lochon Tegiora, Te Chimbarua. Yende Chingivara pa. I think the Chimba de Gachambure, or the Chambure, Chambesum than Dembecone Chimbachi at the Roa. And it should him say, Mikiwa Chupa, so talking unto Chuchuruna Dura. Tingundu Ladami Kovato Jengason Kiwa Kaucheterwa, or the Chimba Chudumche. Take only a tiny the Yawoji Yola, Shala Pemba to be Chimbata, the Neso so kyobala soba mijikbe chimbala soba tinde pendo ya muche goyene ro ani ka sore seba de kongura shenle tsawa ma che pemba chuba tingi jong la sora ta tingi ga de chamba de tsawa chunju jora pemba chuba de le chamba de gora dewa chona kiba chona sangora tsawa ba de tunge chungu de ma de samge ora tingi ni de lamdo dro tingi ya bo jong la seba kongura ma do seba ma goni ma ro kondu dunge chone kondu sajan che ne te chene yo ma to sa seba ke chimbo ro se 진소 최선세 어디 뺏겨서 버려더라 기부 청울이야 뒤쪽에 첨불로단 되는데 거도 거데 가도 럽지 쏘더라 다 기분 정다 첨불에서나 아니 동반이 공부하다로 김버츠에서 봐 삼대다 시럽스야다 어떻게 거라다 준비돼 가서 강걸고 그래도 어디 인도티 계셔 버려 야 뒤지 뭐서
So here then, in the context particularly of a being of a small scope, practicing, the main kind of practices for them are listed as being generosity, ethical conduct, and patience. So when we think about generosity, this is something that includes material generosity, as being materially generous will lead to our having wealth in future lives. But it is also the giving of the Dharma, giving advice to others. It is also the giving of protection from fear when someone is sick, caring for them, or if there is an animal or some other being who has fear for their life, to protect them from that. So giving is a very vast kind of a practice that is really done with a mind lacking attachment. So to engage in being generous in all of these various ways is really about not having that kind of attachment. And then there is the ethical conduct, as is sort of summarized in those 16 dharmas for higher status, the ethics of abandoning harm and doing things that are beneficial for others. But and that is really what ensures that we have a good rebirth. This secures us a birth as a human or a god, having that foundation of ethical conduct. But for those practices to really bring about their benefit, then we need to have patience. If we lack patience, this can easily destroy any kind of virtues that we have accumulated. And really, to successfully have love, this feeling of wanting other sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness, as well as for them to be free of their sufferings and the causes of sufferings, this attitude of compassion, we really need to develop a kind of patience towards sentient beings. So in order to really be successful in for the practitioner of the lesser scope, they need to engage in generosity, ethics, and patience. And these are practices as well that are needed for all of the levels. If one is doing the kind of pursuing one's own liberation or the state of omniscience. And in addition to those practices, one at a higher level also needs to develop the kind of wisdom realizing emptiness, and beyond that, bodhicitta. But the foundation really is having these practices of the being of small scope.
Oh yeah, that's that is ko 기분 정기 감도이나 로 기분 정이나 야 다음에도 왜 시럽 공부할 때네로 너무 차단해서 뭐 너무 짜와네 뽕야 너무 짜와네 뽕 너무 뽕변 거기 로 차발해서 봐 공동아 예타도해서 봐 너무 받아 짜와네 뽕야 시도 뒤 짜와데 아니 뒤에도라 가서 당신들에도라 나 삼상아랑 좀 베테로 teletene nga ye sero shenja kesa ga yuji sha nga zo sengera ne konzo sengera chadan yu su ni che teletene ne kanga kondo nga ye chado de sun ta kanga yo gora sa ko seba de mena ni le yo na ya ko le ke to go maro le ya sa ba kyo to mo sa ba yin de seba de chakba de se shin de me gora o ti indi chakba da 세버디 파 마에 돈달에 뒤 싸워대 가서 다음에 공부하라. 다음에 공부할 때는 당시 세바 방병 고된 토바시고라 최대질에 되어도 남대던 고된기데. 철래 산지를 겹쳐 겹던 바보 지고시. 철래 겹쳐 치워서 코에 동해에 땐도 타버려 치도 얘는 고대다 남대해서 뭐 어때서를 겹선도 했지라. 기분 좋은 값어. 기분 챙겨 값어. 텔레잔데네 ranchibu tunge nama simje tamje tunge da chandu sambe kune lane simje tamje ga chando ane tarwa langwe bechido ki rani kyo kun se yende kundenje kansa tesu tsama shenpen pesum tsoba niba yonsu tsoba kune che tunge kyo kun se yende kundenje kansa tunge wara cha nyamne ane chenso paru chenpa chula chango ra tende tsomba la tene tende tsomba cha nyamdo te chedo ane 전에 산재지 고만 토벌 차섬 대체도네 공부로도 이제베 우마른 제정어 그 출이야 퇴바시 삼로다 양내야도 공부시에 산재지 고만 심제 탐지가 된 통게 산재지 고만 지진에게 토벌 차섬 대체도 중요한 섬 꿀로세다네 셈버쇼스 된디그래
So the kind of refuge that is taken then by a being of middling scope involves again the refuge is really engaging in the practice of dharma, and for the being of middling scope, this involves the wisdom realizing selflessness, having recognized that it is the case that we take repeated rebirth due to our grasping at an I that brings forth all of the other afflictions. Seeing that, they want to remove this from its root. And so this involves recognizing this kind of sense of I, and then the kind of idea of mine, and the sort of us and them that arises in relation to which we give rise to all of these various afflictions, attachment towards one's own side and animosity toward the other, having anger and jealousy and competitiveness and so forth. And so it is by removing that, by removing our grasping at a self and really applying the antidote to our ignorance, as well as that craving, which causes the kind of nurturing karmas that we have previously accumulated into renewed rebirth. So even if we have accumulated much karma since beginningless time, if we get rid of craving, it can't bring about another birth. And so here, in the context of refuge for the being of middling scope, the real refuge is true cessations that are achieved through developing true paths. That practice, again, is the kind of refuge for a being of middling scope. And then when one proceeds beyond that, you see, well, it's not just me who is in this kind of suffering situation, but it is all sentient beings, and recognizing the situation that they are all in. You think, may I free all sentient beings from the sufferings of samsara? May I place them in the state of liberation? And in order to do that, I myself need to become a perfectly enlightened Buddha, one who has removed all faults and developed all good qualities, and has the ability to therefore work for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so with that kind of attitude or motivation, saying, I'm going to practice this dharma of really emptiness and bodhicitta, as well as engaging in the practice of the six perfections, this is the sort of refuge of a being of great capacity. And one is striving again for that state of perfect, complete enlightenment, in which one has removed all faults and developed all good qualities. And for the purpose of being able to do that, we should think that we are listening to this teaching of Nagarjuna's precious Garland, and based upon hearing this, contemplating it, meditating on it, we are going to, by whatever means necessary, achieve that state of complete perfect enlightenment in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. So we should set such a motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah. Tanga de shologa kuchukutu de lesson kuchukutu de be. Dire. Ta de ka de se do sena. Ta ka ji ku to ba ku do. Ka ri ko go sena. Meto hishiki se number meto ba se. Tongba nyung sum do tong ge de ya. Tok be ko ne number to ba. Tin ji ko ne pa number to ma yin ba. Nga je mishiki su tong ne pa se bo che tong ge de se ra. Number meto be shi se. Tongba nyung sum do tong ge shi de se ra. Number meto be shi de. Ene de nam ene shikber ba se ora ta rangone me ba to su ka ga shik me ba su ora ba se ora ka ji. Number meto be shi gen de nam shikbe te se nen ga ba yin nam se na se. Tangbo yo ba che ma ba be shi gen sum do to de ne de ga ga shi ne ne me ba se sha de be se ga ba de be se ora o ten de ma de se ta da wa. Yin nam se na ma yin se. Ma de se ne ka de se ne 당부 니네 라시지 마주바데 좋아 마주베 되는데 당부 니네 라시 마주바 이나 띵아 좀 마신 버세 자신 잡고 나오나 시 자신 당부네 매매로 이네 수수 추이네 자신 잡고 나기와라 어디나 시 자신 잡고 매벌 자신 잡고 통하나 시 랑원에 매벌 랑원에 여바 통만 매원에 랑원에 매벌 여바 통기와레세 좋아 미시베 왕게세 강만 시시를 세트시도 랑게 통만에 강랑 신기 당분이네 마주바들라 마주바 마시네 가서래 미리앙아도 나자기네니 부럽던데 마사바 통그라 그 당분이네 매버라 제마 밀매라 제 자서나 그 매버샤를 따게 부여베 따 매버샤게 말아 따게 주인이 소소 매버를 여바 통니 매버샤를 마도 디마로 어디나 신세거라 강만 시시를 남시라 강만 마시 배워게라 안에 라신이 동바이나 라신 동바 마시네 네 라신이 여바 전도 배워게세 다시 잡고 통하나 신선소라 아니 강만 시시를 남시라 문제 중에 대권에세 그러 소식되고 남게 마도 거래 마도 문제 중 당부 니네고 견지 라신이 동바들에서 거라 내일로지 무슨도 또 남식이 법의 냠사시기 심물해야 된가 버려서 남실라서 법의 동반이 동계 남실 문제 중앙 당분이네 정신기 동반이 버들 동반이 버들 네스 버려서 문제 중앙 대권이 대시치는 남실수 신의 대시배치나 동반이 또ben 무슨도 또배 시기 신이 대단한 거 가지고 대낭을 안에 대해서 가지고래 저번에 와리 신도 그래서 가지고 오야 대치면
So here, then picking up with verse 96, actually. So here, some might have this kind of qualm, and this verse reads, all which previously appeared to awareness, due to not knowing that reality, will likewise cease in awareness, because one has come to know that reality. So here, someone might think that it is this non-conceptual gnosis or wisdom that somehow stops inherent existence through destroying compounded things, as if it were the case that such a wisdom had the power of destroying some kind of inherent existence. However, it is the case that, in fact, this is something that has never existed. Primordially, no phenomena is arisen by way of an inherent existence. And so it isn't as though then that is destroyed later, but rather like the case of someone who has an eye disease, who like they see as though there were falling hairs. It isn't as though by giving them medicine and then they remove that kind of mistaken appearance that you have somehow destroyed some kind of hairs. They didn't exist from the beginning, but rather were only existent to the mistaken perception of that person with an eye disease. So here too, when it comes to ordinary beings and the way that they see phenomena, they don't see them as being empty because they are obscured by this kind of obscuration of ignorance, but rather those who understand this, Aryas in their meditative equipoise, they are able to recognize things, phenomena, as being empty of inherent existence, as being interdependently originated. And this is just the nature of phenomena. It isn't as though they have somehow stopped or eliminated that inherent existence that previously was there through this, but rather through reasoning have come to see what is always been the case.
Oh yeah. 당간에 랑시기 마두발라 랑시기 마두바 색바이기 담보 랑시기 여바데 바베냠샤시기 네 매바 세네 매바 좀 샤바데 마레스 디네 냠샤시데 바베냠샤시데 뭐베 지균이 그래서 뭐 담보 여바데 매바 송게 지베 줄인도 그래서 네 디네 네루 식번도 마레스 뭐베 네루 식번도 마는 거 신기 매바 송게 장도 그래서 요라 이 둘게서 내로 동과 미주세 된주 살세 어디지 람나
So here again, it isn't as though this kind of Arya's meditative equipoise eliminates some kind of inherent existence, but rather from the beginning, this has been empty of inherent existence, and later they see it. But it isn't as though this kind of seeing has the ability to actually destroy some kind of inherent existence, as though it's something where there was some sort of inherent nature previously, and it is destroyed through that wisdom. But it's not as though this kind of wisdom realizing emptiness has a destructive capacity, but rather it is something that sees the nature of reality. It isn't as though it kind of destroyed what was there before, uncovering a new reality, but rather sees the way that things are.
오야 당아지 솔로가 구축급되더라 그들이 어려 아니 가서도서 남시 매 비신네 아니 가 조션 되고 임반데세 제다 지신 람제베 의단 되베 시그네 시세다 어디서도 아티가서 그래서는 로에체세 오마데 로아 나라도 통대게 유다 유신기 추대도 상마시거라 로에체 되고세 로에체 시자다 시반디 상마시 다 주실을 송 최진해서지 전이 버전으로 로에체 시자다 시반디고 최진 아주 통대야도 시자다 시반디고 최진 아니 남시 매 비신이세 어디 상마 동반이 또배 무슨 되게 아니 색버자외 로 아니 비신다부터래서 이 시기 매봐 색버자외 비신다부터래서 거라 남시 매 비신이 조신 되고 임버인데서 대다 지신 람제베 외단데베 색내 시세 대다 지신 람데베서 그니까서 내루 그때다 치다와신도 랍도 제베 아니 동반이 무슨 또베 이 시기 되게서 이 시기 매대시거라 데베 색내에서 대창마 색내 니수 매베 니나 놈네 군주베 최창마터 제 나와메데 대담바 동바자자시도 니나 놈소로 군주베 최도 강가시도 유다 유진 가가 줄리시거라 동반이 무슨 도시도 자니 니나 놈시도 니진 나와 매봐 근데 유진다 출려야 가서 출다 날 출루번에서 봐 제도에 집박소라지 시험이라 다 타대면 나와 경제에 나와도 거 말아 근데 가서래 뭐래서 시자다 시반 되고 공정계 남시대 비신 색제 비신다 보이면 되대서 때 말로봐 이 시기 매세 버려서 이 시기 매 군주비 나와 삼마탐제 고매하시오라 내로지 돈 치다와신도 랍돈 제베 어단 데베 니나 말로봐 시월이 요라래 니나 말로봐 시월이 와 대다 지신 랍제베 동반이 치다와신도 시베 법배시되서 거라 어단 데베 이 시기 매 어단 데베 색내 시세 네 시와 저번 이월에 시원 주그래서 되실라나
So then we turn to verse 97, which reads, "It is maintained that all beings and their qualities are fuel for the fire of awareness. Having been incinerated by brilliant true analysis, they are all pacified." So here it says then that all beings or like goers, and here that all those kinds of dharma refers both to objects of knowledge as well as the subjects which realize them, and they then all of those all beings and their qualities, so all objects and subject minds are fuel for the fire of awareness. in that the direct realization of emptiness sort of incinerates those conventional appearances. So here, when it comes to the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, all conventional phenomena have disappeared. So the kind of this like fire of the wisdom of meditation, the consciousness within meditation, those phenomena, all of those objects and subjects are asserted to be like fuel for that fire, and they are all, without exception, burned away. So as far as the nature of reality, as it says in the next half of this verse, having been incinerated by brilliant true analysis, they are all pacified. So, when it comes to this wisdom, which is directly realizing emptiness, which is able to thoroughly distinguish just as it is the meaning of reality, then with that kind of like brilliance of wisdom, all of the duality, without exception, is pacified. So here, there is no kind of dual appearance in the way that conventional phenomena normally appear to ordinary beings as somehow like different and separate and apart, but rather like water poured into water. There is no appearance whatsoever of the conventional. All of those elaborations have been pacified through this kind of fire, through the incineration with this wisdom realizing emptiness. So as it says here, with that kind of light or brilliance of this wisdom, then this all duality, without exception, is pacified.
Oh, yeah. That is the case. So look at Kuchi Kopjetera. Kuchi Kopjetera. Down there, Kachi Yan did Toba Kudo. Kalkudosina. Oh, today, any shiki may, and now Kunzuki now to Kanga sex one. Take Kanga short chess one. Tina Takunzuki to Kanga Meba to us. Kira Meba Mao, you could do us, Tobacura. Church Tamja Meba Kerr, Tam Meba Mao, Mebaban Jurus. Cheta was at it. Chebeta, or condition to Jurusina, or think Juramares, Mijusera. Take a resina. Shebe Kasere. Mishipa, the word of us. Nimojangi Mishibe Wangisigora. Where Ranshingi Yoba, Totaba Shindo, Tim Maduba de Ranshingi Maduba, Ranshingi Tuba Totaba de Esera. Mishipe and the word of us at it. Chini Tini Nebada, Trota and Ranshiki Mabel Yoba Tota Yoris. Chisu Tombani Kola Taksha Chebachene, Niti Ranshiki Maduba Neba Nasura, Nisha, Toba Nasheba Nasura. Chi Ranshiki Tomba Tenlapan, Tini Neba Tase, Muvenelu Toba Resura, Nebata Muvenelu Toba in Desira. In Desa. Nungo Kasere. 강생 응어보 많이 봐서도 강게 제 응어보 많이 봐서 아니 응어보 중세경 뭐래 응어보랑 신기 주바 랑신기 주바 가봐더니 랑신 매번 겨루시나 강생 응어보 어디 있어라 갈래서 강생 응어보 많이 봐서 어이 버려 응어보 중세경 고아답에 겸에 매번 말이 말에 응어보 중세경 고아답이요 말해서 고랑 강 여바티테래 이나 동반이 무슨 데서도 꾼주게 줘봐대 신도가 와라 오늘 거보랑 신기 줘봐 까봐더니 다 같이 잡아주거라 내 딸이랑 거보 고랑 템바 주고 매나 거보랑 신기 줘봐 까봐대 템바 주고 있지래서 주어져 봐서나 시거라 어디 말해서 거라 거보랑 신기 마주 그래 거보랑 신기 줘봐 까봐대 신기 마주 봐 동반이들 랑원에 주고를 신경이 텐데 제가 소저 연구도 랑신기 마주신도 랑신 주고 딱 봐야지 신의 랑신기 동바 때는 봐봐 등이 내봐당 외변내로 또 봐야지 예세 등이 내봐당 간생 뭐 매니 봐서 간생 뭐 매니 봐 근데 어디 연구서라 강게 생고보 랑신게 주바 메니바 대세시거라. 다도 제네 ngobo 랑시 주바 메니바 대세시거라. 강정고보 메니바세 대세. 강정고보 랑신게 주바 메니바 대세. ngome 랑신게 주바라 갈라주 대세. 대세 ngome 랑신 주바 그래서 대마로 ngobo 랑신게 마두나 다 찍다 랑신게 요고래. 아나 ngome 대 랑신게 요아르베스 우수자기 요라. 제 ngobo rangshi tuba mani ba te che ene ngona ngobo rangshi tuba nige de besan tugu de besan wa te kalan gyos te je ngome kalan gyos rangune tuba kalan gyo de gyo ma re se gora rangshi ji tuba kalan gyo te se te ngobo kora rangshi ji me ba le ya te le de ngobo me ba se de ngobo te shi su te me ba se te ne te le ja rangshi ji tugu ma re se shi ke shi kona temba ma du na te te do me ba sangate me shire de ora te tele kan to kumare rangshin ji tumnan deje do dung shin ji tu kongge so de shiwara deje rab do maduna de ma chena sita de ma che do lo pa ta wa cham de sha ba de to so ko le la re shiwara o de chi dam ya.
So then turning to verse 98, and again, this is based upon the kind of doubt or qualm of an interlocutor who says, well, if you eliminate all of these things, if you say that the kind of wisdom or this kind of brilliant true analysis pacifies all of these elaborations of conventional truths, then is that not an elimination? Getting rid of all of those kinds of conventionalities. So you are basically asserting that nothing exists whatsoever. You're falling into this kind of nihilistic extreme. So here, this is a response then in the first 3 lines of 98, where it says, the reality is later ascertained of what was formerly imputed by ignorance. When a thing is not found, and then the last line reads, how could there be a non-thing? So here, it is not the case that all of this would become non-existent, but rather it is the case that due to our lack of knowledge, those with afflictions then impute or designate on something that lacks inherent existence as though it had a kind of inherent existence. They reify or sort of elaborate on to this which does not have such existence. They again impute it to have such, and then later through reasonings, through using the kind of logic and reasoning to determine the emptiness of inherent existence, having ascertained that, having found or realized the mode of abiding of all phenomena, this is when they then come to recognize that there is no inherent existence. So this isn't in any way a kind of deprecation of phenomena or things as it may be, but rather it is a recognition of their actual nature. So this then raises another qualm. So someone might think, well, is it the case then that this refutation of the inherent existence of things is itself inherently existent? We see that sometimes there are those who want to say, okay, well, phenomena don't have inherent existence, but that emptiness has to be existent in and of itself from its own side. How could you not assert as such, is the kind of doubt again raised by another. And so here, when it is the case that through this process of investigation, you can't find any sort of thing, there is that unfindability, one comes to recognize its then lack of inherent existence. So how could that refutation itself, that unfindability itself, be existent from its own side? If you don't have a support, how could you have the thing that is supported? So here too, when we think about the kind of phenomena like compounded phenomena, if compounded phenomena don't have inherent existence, then how could uncompounded phenomena, or how could their reality, which again is a mere imputation, how could that be existent from its own side? That's not possible. So this is as it comes in the last line. When a thing is not found, how could there be a non-thing? How could their lack of inherent existence itself be existent from its own side?
Oh yeah. 단 되게 남가랑 신기 주바 가기도 와. 양주 거기 도바 구거라. 다 뭐보다 뭐 매바다 남가대랑 신기 주거를 해서 찍고 랑원에 주바치도 여 구글에 삼겨라. 강가전에 매개선도 차도 넣으셔거라. 다는 계란 뒤에 강가에 랑원에 매서 다는 너마치 남가대랑 신기 거를 해서 여바 있는 신나서 어디 말해서라. 너마치 남가랑 신기 주바 가기도 와. 수경하고 명점지 남과야네 명점 수대 아니 수수주병하고도 명점지 명기 명함 단위의 독배 명다 독배왕게 바 샤바삼레 마도 유고랑원에 랑화도 제버지 수주배요 말해서라 수경하고 명점지 남과야네 명점 수수주바때 줘야지네 좀 담바 두고 말해 단위의 왕게 바 샤바삼마도 유경원의 수랑화전에 두고 말해서 걔는 남과야의 명장모 남과대야 명장게 명기왕게 바샤고 삼래 단년도 왜 똑바 단년도 게들 니요라 명기 단년도 똑왜 단년스라 명기 바치다고는 똑바게 지다고라 당부 명리 단에 때 가르세고도 삼 어디티 라고래서 똑왜 삼고라 이네 간에 미식 명디 라고라 라도사 명다 똑왜 왕게 바샤고라 뭐 고란치 망부지 소된게 시워라 다들 민가르다네 당게데 바샤고라서 당연히 왕게 샤고스 고 이마인데 당연도 버티 전에 샤고르마도 고란편에 인겐시 수랑운에 수여나 민강가 찍버지 인고라 민찍버면도 완전불리 민게 만도 마부 민다면도 마부여라 되고 서서 똑배 왕게 되게서라 고란 대바로와 가와케지 마서 말치세야죠. 고랑 대바레서 다들라고 말. 어디서 수경하고 면sam제 남가야네 면상 뭐세. 아니 좀메세 좀어랑 신기 두바 매발이야. 아니 수어랑 신기 두바 요 말에. 좀한테 교체 좀줄때 데브레샤우라 좀중중니. 대저랑 신기 요 마이나 아니 남가테 텔레가 가와요 그래서야. 중미 수다 칼에 티치리 명점 얘기하면 명고랑대랑원에 두고래서 명대랑원에 두고 말해시거라. 티치 명점 얘기하면 명대하나랑원에 두고 그래서는 명대랑원에 두고 말해시거라. 대 명점 그래서 티치 명점 얘기하면 어디 싶다.
So then we turn next to refuting the kind of inherent existence of uncompounded space. So some might think like, well, is it the case that uncompounded space is itself inherently existent? It's sort of like they can recognize, okay, well, you can refute compounded phenomena, those as being inherently existent or existent from their own side, but they start to get uncomfortable at the kind of sense that everything could be not existent from its own side. So sort of searching something out, it feels like, well, there needs to be something that exists in and of itself from its own side. So the uncompounded space, it must exist sort of on its own. Well, here the response to that is that the uncompounded space, sky, is itself just merely a name. In the same way, so here in verse 99, since it is merely the absence of form, space is merely a designation. So in the same way that all compounded phenomena are merely designations, so too uncompounded space is a mere designation, is a mere name. And so when we think about what it is to be a designation, or sometimes a convention, we could say, there is the name, the sort of sound that we give, and then there is the concept. We have a thought of like, oh, I want to give this item this name that motivates that. So when we see a particular thing, in the case of a compounded phenomena, a collection of parts, but also anything, any object of knowledge, we can designate a name to it, but there's no existence in and of itself from its own side. side, but rather exists only due to the force of that designation with name and concept. And so here, if it existed from its own side, from the side of the object in any way, as the basis of that particular name, then it would have to be the case that anyone who saw it would immediately think that name or have that name for that object. But we can see of all the various different languages and so forth in the world, we give different conventions, we give different labels to various items. And so it is not the case that these have any sort of existence, even something like uncompounded space, from its own side. Now, someone might then proceed to think, well, is the name itself something that has a kind of inherent existence or existence in and of itself? But the name too doesn't exist from its own side. So here, continuing into the second half of the verse, it then says, how can there be form without the elements? As we have determined above that the elements lack any kind of inherent existence, then something like form, which is derived from those elements, couldn't have any kind of inherent existence either. And so too, the names, therefore, the mere designation also does not exist. Again, there might be those where they're sort of grasping it, well, something has to exist from its own side. So perhaps it is the name. And here again, the name itself is not something that has any kind of inherent existence. Again, as we've established that the thing that bears the name doesn't have any kind of inherent existence.
Oh yeah. Taisoloka gabatira gatambatira. Gati tamatambatira. Oh, Nikarsidosna. Tade Pumbu Lama Namla Charo Asikdoate. Suji Pumbu Tazun Junga, the Tazun Ranguna Maruba Shesara Mambo. Tade Pumbu Lama Pumbu Shenda Shiora, or Tazurapa Chara and Shiora. Oh, Tidi Sordas, Soya Pumbura, Dushiji Pumbushe, Duchigi Pumbushe, number Shiba Pumbushe, Namshin Junga Tabutase, Namshi Disamate. Junga Ranshigi Matuba Tabuta, and a tar Ranshigi Matuba Tabus, a chiba samba samku desora. Namshi Junga Tabuta, Tanito ne Samchade, Tar Ranguna Maba, Tantamber Maba, Ya Rawa to Tuba Maba Nashi Samku de Sambachate. Teacher come to Tametos, come to Butsamatam Jade, Tameba Inse, Pisere, come to Tametos, in the Gudua. Soya Pumbudan, Dushidan, Namshiji Pumbuyan, Juan, Ranshiji Matuba, Tabutan, Ta Ranshiji Matuba, Imbashindo, Tombar Ramuna Truba, Tombar Samku Dese. Adesina, Ranshiji Trubal, Mebate, Tal Shevanashi, Chick to take it all so but in the Shenko Desora, Matubade, Chita Tomola Sobe, Tenjiki, and Tambatuba Yona, Tambatuba Chigi Ordan, Tambatuba Tomoyore. To check up with you. Teacher come to your time or teach them.
So then we turn to verse 100, which is applying this to the remaining aggregates. So we've largely investigated form and the nature of form through looking at the various elements and so forth. And then here, this applies that same kind of reasoning to the remaining elements. So one should consider feelings, discriminations, volitional factors, and consciousness in the manner that one considered the elements and the self. Hence, the six constituents are selfless. So here, in the same way that we examined like the various elements and the self, which is designated on that basis, or the person actually designated on that basis, none of those exist from their own side. And so like how through investigating the elements and the self, one is able to determine that they don't have any kind of inherent existence or existence from their own side, then so too one should contemplate all other of the aggregates. So using the kind of a reasoning that was explained above, particularly that of identity and difference. So if something is truly established, it either the thing so designated and its basis of designation either have to be a single thing or they are separate in a way that they can't have any kind of connection. So using that sort of reasoning, we are able to damage all phenomenons having any kind of inherent establishment. And so too, we should recognize that in the same way as the person, all of the six constituents are also selfless.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is that is Pumbunga Sigdo, Pumbunga Sido, Suji Pumbu Setinal, the Ganga Dura, Su Ta Te Ro Rechandi, the Tanga Chedi Su Ta Te Ro Recha Shinduda, Tisama de Surva, in a Tambu Su said, Miki Toya Su de la Su Salapsara, Chi Mindi Chidal Jubachan, Chita Suk, Sheban de Medujis, Sumna Chena, Tiro Recha Ganga de Sunandura. Yanga shadu su ta te ro re cha su de mi ge tong ya su chora mi shi ge su cha de su se del du ra su si de ta te ro re cha le so te su kang ga du ra su ji phung bu se ta she ba sim jung le ma bu yo ra sim jung la ju ji che se ma bu yo ra ta ina ti na ne sim jung cho wa dan du shi ni de su lo su den je phung bu se chang ga ja wa ra cho wa de da su ji phung bu cho ya phung bu du shi phung bu se 초로된 직된바다 강가 소화 대화다 동행이 자기에게 전달 써봐 연구 알아. 뒤전에 소화대 메시나를 고 김보서 올 가서라. 뭐세 때 버릇이 전에 수수 대화다 가서라. 소화 대화 동행 뒤전에 대화 주에 자기 주에 동행세 대도는 요자 강가 연구 알아. 뒤전에 소화대 로가 미숙간의 수도 떠는 랍샤라. 심주 망부여라. 소환듯이 sembaraba yelecha pe mambu yore nga chu chida nga chida thana yora suji bumbu choya bumbu dushi de ya tawa da tende chone tubda mawa de de ne samlu ta da chone chegu yora dushi a mare te tende samgyo gan tende samgur mar te keji jibba samgur mare ko takwa rawa yore tende dushi de zo chegu yora tubda mawa da chi tende ya tawe thone ya cheba mambu yongora 자 초아단 두신기들 로가도야데 미세 디토리아 로 지케바다 에네치 두다마다 테조강가 저바데 팅이찬에 요구자 고추 미기 까네 풍부스 로가장가 겹샤라 셴마다 또 좋은 두시 풍부도 지부 에네 가서 템베 풍부로 셈베 풍부 레베 풍부 콘드 풍부 타네 마부치로 심주 강가 타나다 계속 말하자 니 수던 거야 되더라 수지 본부 초에 본부 두시 본부세 수단 두시 초단 두시니 들어서 수지 본부 초에 본부 두시 본부 두지기 본부 써야 돼 심중 현다 라마 때서다 셈바다 레다 뭐냐 되나 마부였다 그래서 수지 본부 초에 본부 두시기 본부 두시기 본부 두시 본부 실례시 풍부 현달에 현변 두제 강가된 두제 풍부나 되더래 심중난에 초안 두신이 조선 대창마 공동아 제타던 데서도 상마 디나 도샤래 수 초란 두시 두제 가서래 수지 풍부 초에 풍부 두시 풍부 두지 넘버 10에 풍부 많이 게 상마 두지 풍부나 되더라 오 대치 남내 보지래 풍부가 그양다 뭐야 대치 남나
No, no. So here then, in considering the five aggregates, when we talk about the aggregate of form, in general, form includes both sort of visible forms. It includes sounds, smells, tastes, and touch. So here, when we are talking about the kind of classification of phenomena into material things or form, consciousness, and non-associated compositional factors, we use that term form as a general kind of term that includes all five of the objects of the senses. However, when we are speaking particularly about the kind of object of the individual sense powers and so forth, then form is specifically referring to visible forms. But this is something that we should understand. So in the context of form here as one of the aggregates, aggregates, it includes all of those kinds of material elements. And then we have the next two that are listed are feelings and discriminations. So when we think about our mental factors, is the term I'm going to use, those mental factors are, variously listed. There are like 51 commonly described mental factors, and all of those are individual minds that are mental factors that are important for sentient beings or for worldly beings. Now here, the reason that in particular feelings and discriminations are listed is because first, feelings are really the source of most of our actions. I mean, we are driven by our desire to have happiness, to have good feelings, and to avoid kind of suffering feelings. And so, although we could speak about all kinds of different mental factors, things like attention and wisdom and meditative stabilization and mindfulness and so forth, we can talk about our negative kind of mental factors like anger as well. This is an important feeling, is particularly important in terms of a driver of our various actions. And so too our discrimination, in the sense of this is the basis of dispute between, say, worldly beings and those who propose certain tenets or views. Is it this? Is it that? Have we correctly identified the kind of object there? So discrimination or discerning what is the basis is, again, another particularly important mental factor, which is why it is listed among the 5 aggregates. And so we could list out all of our various mental factors. We could have the aggregate of mindfulness. We could have the aggregate of wisdom. We could have the aggregate of attention and so forth. But the reason that they are not all listed individually is, again, because feeling and discrimination are particularly important. Now, volitional factors includes a lot of different types of those mental factors, as well our karma, those kinds of imprints that we have laid down, our intention and so forth, those that are not contained within the other baskets of the aggregates. Like, so whatever is not consciousness, but also doesn't fall into being feeling or discriminations, is then volitional factors, which is an important category for our other mental factors as well as karma and imprints. So this is in just kind of an overview of the 5 aggregates, and particularly why we list out feelings and discriminations in particular.
Oh yeah. Utanga to de liu tambo de chora. Ngado da ngele so tembe liu de chora. Ngado ta chu se de wa ti shen am ko shi da me do. Da ngele she de zang tongba ni de kyang she ra. Tongba ni de ta chu de wang ge de ba chi ko ya ti pa ka ten de she do. Tenda ko su nge ba chen ne ten de chi zo yo do. Ten jin de ba jo. 뭐 컨디션에 코나 차셔도 가진 거마다 코라치 gange 수지 로버 메고 요 말에 대선자 고 속바 진지 뭐지 고요라 대선자 고 땡지 되버려 좋았습니다. 코라 민다사 시들이야 규진다 차셔 망보지 소 대비치려 아니 민지 따요라 어디인데 고 땡지 되버려 코라 gange 크리안 수지를 때문에 치르버셔버나시 다들 딱봐 집부 라오하시라 참매 집부세라 차산이 지금에게 근데 요 말와 대선자 땡데 조 삼루다나 뭐 컨디션에 되다 초네 민다서들 가르가르도 로 뒤에 가져도 가르가르도 대삼루다 될 때네 봐다요 레삼 로 가사르진에 풍부가를 때네 네 봐다요라 강바리네 고다 개군 찍바다에 토가다 뭐다 단담다 mam보여라 계속 강걸 따위라 자분이세나 테나들레싱 요레 추요레 리요레 도요레 미요레 모토요레 강가요레 다rum문이 따디 계속 때네 바다셔요라 근데 그 mam보지 촉발을 때네 바다기도 땡진 레바 좋아가 mam보지 촉네 차셔도다 레네 아니 그 명지 따는 내가 제게시 두길마도지 고수제 낼 먹어야지 코란 강자 랑자 통계 지요 말로 어디서다 땡진 레버를 좋아가 되네 동반이도 시에서라 랑와도 주베 동바서라 땡진 레버를 좋아가 되네 땡네 다바 돼서 매버를 해서 매버 말에 차세 대졸라 때네 다시 대졸라 때네 봐 명다네 콘주 내가 지도네 내가 신게지 저 신게지 노아 된 가지고 숨 죽고요라 자꾸 때네 딱 받잠도 요아래 에세 로 풍부들 간사에나 풍부가라 때네 딱 받잠도 요아라 속불 내가 전에 가사 내가 지기시라 샘기지 두자라 삼라 코페 삼라 두자 삼 당기시라 고유 전에 다 유치기시라 고나거든 다 나가시라 락반난 다 나시라 락반에 주네 다 알려주시라 샤고도 소화단 두시단 두지 때저 자와체네 샤고도 맞에 고 라와치네 때저 때 락바 락바체 말에 간사디 레가체 말세 로가치 샤고라 랑게토베 간사 로가고라 티 메자 코테저 차셰레레 자와체바데 코랑 자와체바 샤고도 땡진 대버는 좋아서 나라도 때 삼겨 말에 소소르지나 나 삼겨 나 라와치 나라기 예삼사 코디브치나 요아 나랑군에 예사 나라기 딩에 소보르 딩에 셈데 소아렌 두시데 강바레 락바레 케만도아 tuzu to megune tuzu madone sosu yebe nore do sosu misunza mi sobo mena mi chagmaro ine tuzu madone chi yonare shagdo tuzu da kaga chogmala tene tabo kula tenjin de bari jo asonda rawan du tuba yo mare se kora mebre se yo mare tenjin de bari tendo tene tene tabo sonda ko yore tene da ne chawa chenge ji tubi wada o ti chi shegdo ini kaga chi chone yesa temba tube chik doa madu, temba tube tuma madu, chik dude tate mambu kukdoa, chik dude tate tunda. Chokpa repji ina, dina sa toto dina chokpa mambu yora, dude mambu yora. Di sa toto de cheche rawa de tube mete, rawa de tube chik jene yo mare, rawa de tube tuma jene yo mare si yora. Temba tube chik da, temba tube tuma kanto madu cheche da. Temba tube chik du madu kare sina, temba tube chik ina, rawa chik inguru ase. temba tube chik du madu de chache rwa se, ku cha mambu dwa. temba tube chik ina be chik gyangya che, rawa du tube chik gyangya ko ra, cha mambu ye ku marwa, ye shing marwa. temba tube chik du madu de chache be che, cha mambu dwa se ra. temba tumge ke rawa ye chik imba che, rawa ye chik imba che mena, rawa ye duma imba tele ja yung marwa. chik mena, sakbe nebung chik mena, sakbe nedo chik mena, sakbe nebung mi jwa shing se da. 내 도도 씨면은 내 뽕샤 망부 연구 말아. 진짜 샤네 티스도. 진짜 삼르다. 소소 다를. 삼르다게 이나 까지나 소소 잡아서 근데 내 지주고 봐도 르기 차셔를 삼르다. 때 말에 와 가신 들어서 기부삼이 추메 메멜루면 남심에 꾸면은 텔레션에 기부 가시도. tiso de mare sines migi sheba de mare naga sheba de mane sheba mar kondu de mare ngaje de mare trado de mare ane ta kawa do chi yone yokure something de samluta na ko tong ba de changu do tong ba le thara mambu cha yora shenda pa shan pumbule de shembe ta yo mare se ti samluta tu na de do pumbule de shembe so bo do soa de sem da lule loso rāwa shi ngōpa sepa nā shi tā shi yuwa mā rā sa nā tīngi nī tu tōku tō tā yinpa liya, tīngi tōku tō mī tā tā liya wā tīndē samla tā nā kō sem liya, nam yu kānsu samla tā tā liya nī yu rā wā tīndē samla tā rā tī nā shi tā nam yu kānsu chā chā shab nā shi pūmi pūmbu lē shi mē tēlā pūmi tētē mē tī shiba pūndē tī shiba kā shi shi nā shi tā tūyindā tā ngā tī, tī nā liya rō sōngā tā ngā tī kā shi rō sōngā sobu de da mares ro sobu le tense beta yo mares sobu de dalia tabana shindu lu na shinche yo mares dala sobu de pa ten shindu lu na shingota de yo ma dembe chuji yo mares demba sigra demba de liang ho ta de da ho chiben de ni ma to yo mara ane ho chiben de se dalia sobu dan de Nilang gotan dance na ngochi pe de chidro. Dalia mota dan de. Paju dan de. Ro. Choju dan de kangba dan dance na ngota de de chidro. Tinde che ni yan samlu tan da chidro. Pumi pumbu le sheme. Dela pumi te de me taba na shi shindo sha na shi. Pumbu la ta te ba yo mar ta la pumbu te ne yo mar shara. 봐. 근데 덴베스지 풍불한 덴베스지요 말이잖아. 근데 입대야 말이잖아. 소바대야 말 타트유잖아. 우만 죽을 것을 타니 되는 타트유시와. 다 덴데 삼로다네. 디나는 마무셔야 돼 주대왕게. 타까네 레레레레네 까네 그 똑바 여자 선만 지역이 와라. 되게 되래. 동반이 최쟁이 때리 마도시 동반이 라와도 주베 동반을 다시 개발시요 말아. 어떻게 뭐지? 다른 데 뭐지? 어떻게 질랍니까?
So, with that, then this completes the first chapter. And so this went through higher status and definite goodness. The higher status piece was going through those 16 dharmas for achieving higher status. And so we don't need to go through that again. And then in terms of definite goodness, it got into the explanation of emptiness and how to go about realizing emptiness, particularly through considering dependent origination or interdependent origination, in the sense that nothing comes about solely from itself alone. It has this kind of stand-alone existence without any kind of dependence upon causes and conditions, no dependence upon parts, no dependence upon the mind that is so designating it. And this is, non-Buddhist tenant schools can hold to an idea of some kind of a self that is permanent, unitary, and autonomous, that has this existence that isn't dependent upon various parts, that isn't dependent upon the mind that designates it as such, but has this existence in and of itself. And so here, when we look at something like, for example, a person is designated upon a collection of parts, the collection of these aggregates, and we can't find, or we can't point to something that is actually that person. Or we say designate a house on a collection of something that has walls and windows and doors and a roof and so forth. Or we designate, oh, this is the world, this kind of hard ball that we have that has various things like oceans and woods and various mountains and so forth, beings within it. We call this the world or the earth, whatever it might be. All of this is done by placing a name, by using a convention in order to designate something. And it isn't as though any of these phenomena have existence in and of their own right, independent of their causes and conditions or their parts or this mental labeling. So whatever is, as Nagarjuna has said in his fundamental verses on the middle way, that whatever is dependently originated, that is explained to be emptiness. But he continues emphasizing that these things are not all dependent, or not all completely non-existent, but rather it is the case that whatever is dependently designated, it is existent in the sense that there is functionality. We can establish this through our direct perception of things. We move our body and we say, I moved, or like we say, my head hurt, like I'm sick when our head hurts, or I'm sick when our hand hurts, and so forth. And if it were the case that these conventions were not valid somehow, it would, that there had to be something that existed in and of itself as the basis for those labels. Well, then none of our language would really work. If we had a kind of, well, the hand is over there and then the eye is over here, how could you say I'm sick when your hand hurts and so forth? So we have this kind of feeling, this sense, this sort of idea that, well, I'm here, I exist in and of myself in my own right. But when we investigate and analyze, we can find that there's really no such thing there. We are a dependent designation. We are dependently designated upon a particular body. We wouldn't be considered a human without this particular configuration of a body and so forth. And there are many ways in which we can investigate and analyze that don't undermine the functionality or a convention intentional existence of phenomena, but get rid of that sense that they have this existence in and of themselves, like particularly by using the kind of investigation of, we could say, identity and difference. So if we have like something like a clump of earth and we say, well, this thing, it exists in and of itself, well, that negates its being dependent upon various parts or various causes and conditions. If something has that kind of true existence, it can't have any sort of part. It has to be a singular thing in and of itself. And so here, if we don't have that kind of existence, sorry, if we have a single thing that abides in that kind of truly existent way, we actually couldn't have an aggregation of those kinds of things. If it had, again, that sort of unitary existence in and of itself, we wouldn't be able to have an aggregation of phenomena. And therefore, this is really directly negated by our direct experiences of things. So here, as was said earlier in the investigation of the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness. But if not these, then where could the person be? And so there are various ways when we look for the person within the basis of designation. We can look through all of our physical parts, all of our various consciousnesses, our visual consciousness, our mental consciousness, and none of those can be the person. And this is the kind of investigation that we need to engage in order to come to an understanding of emptiness. However, there are many different levels of subtlety to this kind of understanding, in that some people might be at the point where they are considering that there can't be some kind of a self totally separate and apart from the aggregates, as in something that is like unrelated. And then there can't be something sort of within the aggregates either that you can find and point to as being that thing. We see the various modes of analysis that are presented by Nagarjuna in terms of the fivefold analysis, or like Chandrakirti adding to that with a sevenfold analysis, looking at like a chariot, for example, but we could use this in any sort of you could use any kind of example, use the person. But when it comes to investigating this, like, is the self, the person, sorry, their form? Well, no, they're not just their form, for example. And so too, we can go through, well, do they possess their form? Is there a kind of first supported and supporting relationship there? So we can have those kinds of ideas of something being the support and something being the supported, or maybe they have a relationship of possession, in the sense that and possession can have two different kinds of possession. We can have one of a single nature, like I have a body, or I have a head, or something where the object possessed is of a different nature, like I have a cow, or I have a car, and so forth. And so investigating in these ways the relationship between the basis of designation and the thing so designated, do they have this kind of relationship of being the singular same thing? Or do they have a support and supported, or a kind of relationship of possession? Investigating like this, and then Chandrakirti adds in, looking at, well, is it the shape, or the arrangement that is the thing? Or is it the collection? And when we engage in this kind of investigation and analysis, we can come to an understanding of how it is that a phenomenon can't have that kind of existence in and of itself.
오야 당가서 레오니바더라. 당내레 빼마르 땜바서도. 응어도 주다. 내레 타르와토베 교니부터 뺄네. 빼마르 땜바서도. 당보 내레 주디 치때. 로와 타르와토베 주디 저 내레 주디 치때. 되네야 응어도 주대. 양내레 주대. 된듯이 뺄네. 서라 빼마르 땜. 디 빼마르 땜바르샤. 다 될래야. 네 가르도세나 다들 sabje 먹어지. 다 지난해 당부대 가르도세나 셰신 템바 제바세. 셰신 템바 제바다. 다 당부대 솔가 당부대 셰신 템바를 잡았어. 동반이 셰차를 방에마. 다이나 배신다지 고네니야. 양자 고트에서 다해로. 셰신바데 배신다지 고네 양자 로리아. charge, Shesi temple charo asido. Oh, did it a solga tambuti. Yeah, Chidar Chushin, Yalata Ase, Chushin Kele Tombotel Yoba, Kele Tombotel, ya, Chushin Sigwara. Chidar Chushin, Yalata, Malupani Shikchena se. Chushingi Yalas the Pagwas and the Chushin Pata to Tombuchi, Tando coverage Tongudoa. Tangone Senate Pagwa Gamma, the Pagwa Shune Chishin, Pagwa Gamma, the Yomara, Kotabuchi Yomara. Pata Duzanko Rangone, Tapu over the chicken Buddha, ever so is Yora. Chashe Pagwa Gamma, Tishu, Pagwa Gamma, Sendashi, Totosi, Tabuchi Yomara. Oh, the Pechan Shedwa. Chidar Chushin Yalata, and in Malubani, 6 years. Dombu Chimbu Chuara, Tapa Wachi Shuni, Shu Kagaba Shuna, Rangone, Taki Tambu Rangone Trube, Chepura Chichi, Nimbuchi, Evers, and the Tongu, the Yomarwa, Wachizanko, Chashet Zula Ten, the Pachi, Tapa Sam Remato, Rawandu Trubaki, Chepuchi, Rangone, Trube Nimbuchi, or Marisera. Chidar Chushin Yalata, and in Malubani, 6 years, and你既然没得是，他说你不见有嘛了，这不去到东不去，接通也有嘛了，车些讲的嘛都是，这车些了电的话大呢，你车些的我这个给东不收了，去要了，电的打不什么的，既然没得了，基本上是我这那些，基本刚才的这个结果的是看不住了，基本上看不见，现在这当着，可是当着啥说。Chui comes a tada, choosing chan of cheese. Say come take a shot robot and this is chat of chira. Say come, me lung comes here. Drag chata, utayata, Dongsan Kovena, Dongsan Kor, Utaya Kora. Number Otazula Tene come true, they will attend the part of what they matochi. There's a part shitana. Ruba shi sha shi, tin cha shi tichana. The Tutu Saragmarwa, Skibi Lucia, the Tutu Sakaragmarwa. Oh, dear Chipadesemere. Come je signa se. Kibuyan, come je signa tedanda. Kibutia, come to devil attend the top of some resegora. Lugis Tata Chusila Sobarwa, Shata Rubala Soba, Tezukanga, Lung La Soba. Tesuletene true or true down or tesuletene Sakam Chukam Megam Lungam Namge comes here. Namge comes here the Uga Namgatira, Tonsan Kudo, Utanya Kora. In a Kogana, the Tonsan Kora Mato Kozu Kuju Jasaragmaro. Tigangazu Ya Tenshigura. Charles Udurchina and Utansaragmaro. Utasmarana Sabute Maro. Tezukanga. Tejan ne target Javachiba Shago, the tossing the Tugu or mother, Tando Kabuchik, so you're not a Shagran at Hoti Maris. What did it? Chidari Chushin Yalata, Malu Jenny, Shikjanas, and Chian Metar Special, Pegone, Laya Shagura. Kibuyan Kansaya, come just signated and Rase. Oh, Shenam Tamje, what it all it is Lam de Medo. Chidar Chushin Tombuda Malupa nature, Ningbu. Tashi Chen, Shia Kake Kajashine, Raeke or Maresera. Southern Church in the Shina Tedan or Ranshingi. Tuve Ningbu Tusam metals, or the Ningbu Chiames, Ramune Trubake. Chebu Tombuti, Raya or Mareset and that. Digital.
So then next we turn to chapter 2, which is called the interwoven, as here it will give sort of a description of the causes for definite goodness, and then a kind of a description of the causes for higher status, and then back to definite goodness, and going in a way in which it interweaves those together. So here we begin in the first verse of this, and I will just go with 101. And this is given giving a kind of example to refresh our memory of what has been explained before regarding emptiness. So here it reads then in verse 101, when one splits apart the plantain tree along with all its parts, one finds no core at all. So too, when one splits apart the person with its 6 constituents, one finds no essence at all. So here, when you have something like a plantain tree or a banana tree, it seems like there's something really solid there, like as if in the middle of that there were a solid, hard core, some sort of essence, the thing that is there. It is that plantain tree or that banana tree that has that essence to it. But as you begin to pull off the skin or take off each leaf of that, although it seems like there's something hard, that there would be like a core there, as long you continue to pull off the skin and eventually there's nothing whatsoever. You can't find anything at all. And so like doing that with a plantain tree, and you come to see that this is something that is merely imputed. We have this sense that like, yeah, there's this hard, solid core right there. But when we actually search for it, we come to find that it's something that is merely dependently designated. So too, when it comes to the person, when you engage in the same kind of analysis on the basis of the person, although it seems like, yeah, I'm right here, I exist in and of myself, when we begin to investigate that and look at the various constituents, again, the person is composed of various elements. So there's like the flesh and the bones, the kind of hard parts of our body. There's the liquid parts of our body, like our blood and our marrow and so forth. There's also the need to have heat. We have to be able to keep ourselves warm. And so too, have the flow of movement that we have with the element of wind. And also we need the kind of empty spaces. So it is independence upon a collection that we can posit there being a person. We designate or impute the person. But when we set aside each of those things, like you go through and try to find the person's body, right? But you go through each of those elements and try to look for it within those constituent components, you can't point to anything. It's not the flesh, the bones, the heat, the various kind of liquid or the sort of wind element, nor is it the space. I mean, again, we have to have space to be able to be a living human. If you were made of something solid like iron, there's no possibility for movement in that. So we wouldn't be a breathing, living human being. But it seems as though there should be something that we can find, as if we looked within this, we would be able to get to this essence or this core. But so too, when you split apart, when you look for that person within the basis upon which it is designated, there's nothing among those 6 constituent elements that one can point to as being the person, like the example of this plantain tree, wherein when you search among, when you go through all of the various parts and destroy those or sort of look through them, there's not even a single atom of an essence, an inherent nature that can be found.
Oh, yeah. Oh, then Chönam tamje da me she tijiri kawa namje song se do. Chö tamje rangi tangi rawa du trube tangi de yo ma re se. Sanje chomden de song do a se ti se gora. Chönam tamje da me se ti kasi lemba. Da se de da kansa se da de marwa. Chö tamje rangi tangi kare ina kawa pumba suda chude chal so rangi tangi yora. Rangi ngo yora rangi tangi. O ti rawa du trube yo ma re se. Chönam tamje 다음에 랑게 다 랑웨 랑게 당니데 랑게 모데 랑웨 당니도 요 말에서 디치리 가와 남지 송서 대송자 체 담제 다음에 산제 송버레서 가바도 송도스네 워덴 도트 참미도 돌레서 가르세도 지다라 출신 럼베 동볼라서 지다라 출신 럼베 타위 깨라 동보들와 지다라 출신 럼베 동볼라 닝분 되면서 tel야시 닝부를 지워서 랑군에 주베 책부를 지워서 삼데 지다가 제가 논하시거라 닝분 되베 미세 랑군에 주베 책부를 지워베 텔해 동부 지워베 되베 미세나 시거라 닝분 되면 rinbe shikche jansa pakwarererere shene pa shikne tayi nase 치다 나나 치로 박발에 요마레 나로 박발에 요마라 치다 나나 닝부 예메 따라서 최난 탐제 대달시에 버리기에서 오다 최 탐제 직벌에 자세 망보지 초네 될 때는 바다네 얘네 랑긴 오샤고로 마도 라왕도 주베 오치요 말에서 최난 탐제 대달시에 버리기 뭐더라 어디라 던딩마도 다메랑 신기마라 치다 야 어째질라나 된지도
So then the first two lines of 102, it says, hence the victors have said that all things are selfless, that there is no such self of phenomena. So here, when we see this word self, this is referring not just to the person, but to all phenomena, pots, pillars, and so forth, that would have some kind of like an essence. It's that they're having an essence or a nature. So that is what is meant by self. So here we should be careful that that's not just applicable to the person, but it's really something that all phenomena could have, like something that would be findable or some sort of nature or essence. And so here the Buddha has asserted that there is no such autonomous nature or existence in and of itself. And this is then backed up by a quotation from the sutras, where it says that just like when you have the sort of stalk of a wet a banana tree, and there's someone who wants the essence of that, like they think, oh, there's some sort of core right there, and then begin in stages pulling apart the various like pieces of skin or pulling off those leaves, they in the way that they can't find either outside or inside any sort of essence to that, that likewise should you know all phenomena to be. So just as someone who might look at a banana tree and think like, oh, there's something really hard there, I'm going to get the core of that, I'm going to get that essence, and as they pull back all of the various pieces, there's nothing there that has that kind of solidity or essence to it. And so rather than there being such a nature, a self to phenomena, rather they are imputed upon a collection of parts and designated as various things.
뭐야 다들 솔로가 니버들어 솔로가 니버들 가르쳐도서나 다 컴퓨터가 다 매발 비로 말려서 진짜 다 매발 진짜 다다 매라시지 맞아 어디 다 매바 니가 라시지 맞아 봐서 뒤시에도 솔로가 니버들 다 매발을 써봐 간가 라시지 주봐요 말해서 이 컴퓨터가 다 매발 결에 때나 봐봐 예세 컴퓨터보다 저쪽에 라테네 답에 다 매발 와 때네 답을 삼래 라운에 다 매발 결에 깨부 결이야 되니 시행이 송거라 결에 때나 봐봐 예세 어디 가르스네 간사다 컴퓨터보다 다세 컴퓨터가 다 매발셔야 돼 간사다 아니 컴퓨터보다 그 다음에 밖에 버텨야 때는 퍼버셔야 주세 다 제바인데서 저런 셰베 셰구베 주세인데 제바인스 셰바티 주세인데 제바인스라 그래서는 컴퓨터다 다음에 버텨야 때는 퍼버인스 주세인데 주세 가르서 최탐제 다음에 제 가원남지 송베처래 산제 좀 되게 최탐제 다음에서 와 두제 탐제 메다 와서 탐제 동 최탐제 동시 다음에 와서라 어디 송번에 시더니 상계가 된데 송도 세켜려 아니 셰그에 송거라 야능어보랑 시게 매바티치 야능어보나 켜를 셰베 주제에 등어보랑 시게 저 탐제랑 어보 탐제 랑게 땅이 랑원도 줘봐 매베치 대선다티 하고야 치도 계란 셰그 있는데 거네 그래 저 탐제 다음에서 상계 송도 와대 주제 지라려 디kopta 태위에 송거라 주생을 주체에서 주체대 ngö보랑 시기 매서 ngö매자랑 시기 매도 제발 ngö보다 ngö매 가이나야 아니 라시 주투가 말에서 대상이 좀 된데 송샤대 주생이 결혼을 하고 야치도 시기에서도 어찌질라나
So then it continues by in the second half of verse 102 by saying, "It has been demonstrated to you that the six constituents are selfless." So here again, the victors have said that all things are selfless. It has been demonstrated to you that the six constituents are selfless. So here it has to you, the king, been demonstrated. There's a reason why this has been shown to you, that all the person as well as the six elements that constitute the person are selfless. And this is really because the victor has taught that all phenomena are selfless, whether we are talking about the person or the six constituents that are the kind of building blocks of that person, that all phenomena lack any kind of inherent existence. All phenomena are taught to be empty and selfless, as we see within the Four Seals. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. All contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering, and then all phenomena are empty and selfless, and nirvana is peace. The Buddha has taught this for the benefit of beings, and so here the victor has taught this in order to establish that all phenomena are selfless. So therefore, as it explains, there is a reason that this is that I'm teaching this to you, the king, and it is also to demonstrate that those non-things, emptiness itself included, is not inherently existent. So in the way that all phenomena have been established, whether it's the person or the kind of six constituents of the person have been established to lack such a self, even those things that are selfless, that the non-things are selfless as well, or lack inherent existence.
Oh yeah. That's look at somebody there. Da mebar. Da mebar niga rashi jima tubare to da mua tubare shishegdo. Da mebar yanda chishin misu me. Yanda bam rawa da bam ngaji ton na shi mi bana shi yomares tu yomares. Yanda chishin ton shi da wa shindu yomares. Na chi da wa shindu yomares ka shindu. Da me da wa da se. Da wa da me ba. Temba tuba da wa da ba. Da temba ma tuba. Da me ba ya temba ma tuba. Da me da wa da. Tichiri tuba shimbe. Do sa ale. Da me. Temba tuba da wa da. Tuba shimbe. Do ba jeba yense. Tuba shimbo se da di jeba di do. Kusun tu tuba kudang sung tu. Mitin shole tamba tar tuba se. Tup se de. Mitin sho kui kyan sama tup rwa. Sungi kyan sama, yiki kyan sama tup tanda. Mishibe momba sama tamze se. Kusun tu yende tamze tar tuba tala se ora. Mitin sho tamze tuba tala. Tuba ase se ora se. Mitin ka se kusun tu kui le kyan meba, sung le kyan meba. Kui kyan, sungi kyan, tuki kyan tamze tuba. Meba so tuba. Cho maluba, mitin cho tamba am ya tuba. Tamba se de meba se ne sosun besu se meba se. Tamba am, kusun tu kyan tamze tamba am ya tar tuba chimba. Tuba chimba se. Da meba rangshingi tuban dobar jebe kusen yoye se. Chichi da meba yanda chidar misu me. Da me tawa da. Chichi tuba chimba do se. Tuba chimba da meba rangshingi tuba dobar jeba ma kakbar jebe kusen yoye de se. Da me rangshingi tuba rangshingi tuba tawa. Da chinji lo yin bichirsi, Tisi da me ba yanda chi shi mi su me, tona shi mi su me. Da me tawa da, tisi tuba chimbi do se, lo chinji lo se, namgyu nga zo lo lengi le, da rangwa du tuba tawa, da gewa rangwa du tuba tawa, sama rangwa ni tuba nangi wara, rangwa du tuba nangi wara. O de na shi me ba de sa ye so ba de se, da me ba sama, Rashimi sume, tada dame tawata, tichi tuba chibu dogwa res. Danle tende neba chi meba da ti yoma res umbo res akwaya chida. Danle tende chi yoba jimba tiki kyo kanga yungu wara. O te chadang la soba kyo kanga yungu chati dogwa chidu sanje. Ine tami sumbo res. O ti chila.
So then in verse 3 or 103, it continues, in this way, neither self nor non-self are ultimately perceived just as they are. Therefore, the great sage refuted both views of self and non-self. So here, these are not, both the idea of a self as well as non-self are not established as they are observed by us, by ordinary sentient beings. So here, when it comes to the Buddha, they have taught that this is equally, the self and the selfless are equally non-existent or not truly existent. And so here, a Buddha is one who has overcome all of the kinds of adverse conditions or negativities of body, speech, and mind. They've overcome all faults of body, speech, and mind. And this great sage or great being then has a reason for averting our establishment of inherent existence of both the self and the selfless. As again, these are not observable within the sphere of a correct kind of cognition. And this is because the view of the self and the selfless as being inherently established is by its nature mistaken, a mistaken kind of consciousness. So it is the case that our innate mind is mistaken with respect to this. We have this feeling of like I existing in and of ourselves. And this kind of innate mind that grasps at I and mine, this does not exist in actuality. So here, as was explained before, these are not something that are observable to consciousnesses that are unmistaken, like say in Arya's meditative equipoise realizing emptiness, but rather that, as was explained before, the self and that which is selfless, neither of those are observable as something that is ultimately established.
뭐야, 어디. 단디 양 되셔도. 뭐뭐 다시 맞춰 봐서. 뭐보다 뭐몇 가이나 된 맞추고 말해서. 당부티셔. 쇼르가 시바된 봐. 통당 터서 터바예서. 아니, 대미 좀바 멤버 송세. 아니, 가래. 초래 밑에 초주나. 대니 니가 된도 민세. 저래. 터당 통당 터서다 통화 수다 터바 자다 지다 로다 레셔를 소바샤기라 통당 터서 토바예세 수제주 레셔를 소바치를 소바강가 토바예 때민세 먼저 통화나시 라와도 주바 통화나시 템바 마레세 때민세 아니 쯤바르베 tāne mēbe 쯤바르베 쯤바르다 주바레 나와나시 메템바 소자고 라나웨 무슨 저래 나와나시 메템바 소자 쯤바르 요라 이네 쯤바 mēbe 쯤바데 마레세 순순자시 요라가 좀 매바 뭐 근데 때네 mēbe 쯤바 마레세 데데라 때메 쯤바 멤버 소세 초라 미드 초주나 되니 이가 좀더 민세 되가셔도서나 이가 초당세 통화다 돼서 유튜브 대시도 수다들이 쳐다서가 투어에 템바주바 민바다 템바주바 말해서 그래서 네 좀바 얘네 매바대야 말해서 그래서 매매 규제 요래서 규제 가르치나 이가 전도 양다 버려 주바 매베시 니가 또 좀바 전담바 주바 매 누가 소래 유튜브에 전담바 주바요 말해서 좀바 돼야 좀바 중간시에 싸워는 매베 좀바 돼 말해서 니가 전도 대 양다 버려 양다 버려 주바 매베시 템바리 여바까네 teme tang yana tembar yoba kana teme re dugure se teme re mare tembar nawa na shi tembar meba mato ko tenchin tembar jo chule yora teme re mare tembar yoba kane teme tang yana meba rangshi ji chuba jo tadi ya kachik chu lakudwa ali tambu tamma de chi lokshan ka isara tongdang teso tuba ye teme chuba member songse ane chola miten cho ju na teni niga tendo minse diwa ma de shuda niga tendo tonga da teba so yu tu she ra yu tu tuba ye tenpa tuba minba tang asya tene chumba ye me minba sumbe kyusen yu de so odi kyusen de kudwa kyusen kar kudu sina teni niga tendo de yangda ba tuba minbe chere o tene yu tubu te tanga ra ane chumba de teme ki chumba minba o tende yangda ba tuba minbe chere tenpa yo ba ka ne teme tanga yana minba rangshin ki tuba yu de tenpa yo me munge yinbe tadi kachi su yang toba kudwa o tadi kari toba kudwa se tenpa yo ba ka kudwa se di ka na teme re du re se wara yana ane meba de rangshin ki tuba yu kire se chikta yo go ruwa se gara ta ka ne rangwani tuba chikta yo go ruwa se tenpa yo me munge yinbe se kena tenpa yo ba da meba nyi de munge ruwa se o chide munge se de nga zo takpa da mi takpa ruwa cheba da ma cheba se ra cheba da cheba ma yinba kawa da kawa ma yinba se ne munge ruwa kini nyi kanru nan du ruwa mi takpa da takpa se ne munge ruwa mi takpa ya tu ne takpa kek ruwa takpa ya tu ne mi takpa kek ruwa ni da ni ma yinji pungsum se ni ga yinge meba ni ma yinji pungsum meba ruwa chiki todo chiki de kek ruwa tala munge ruwa ni da ni ma yinji pungsum mi se ba chishi nambar che de chishi kek ruwa tala munge se tembar yoba da meba ni de munge ruwa se kena chiki de paa ka na tembar yoba ka na tembar meba de tembar yogu re se wara tembar yoba de tembar mena ne tembar druba de kasar megu re se wara oti shikidwa ya tichi lamna this one ya
Yeah. So then turning next to 105. So here it says, yeah. So here's some of the, yeah. I'm gonna leave that aside. In 105, then it reads, hence, this world is ultimately beyond truth and falsity. Therefore, the Buddha does not accept that it really exists or does not. So here, again, when it comes to the way that the Buddha asserts the existence of all phenomena, it is the case that they are not truly existent as they appear. That is what he has asserted. But as it reads in this verse, then, whatever is seen and heard and so forth, the six objects, the Buddha, the sage, has said that those are not truly existent. But it isn't the case that that falsity, their lack of true existence, then becomes utterly non-existent. So here, there is a reason that this is this falsity or this lack of true existence is not complete non-existence. So someone could misunderstand, and when true existence is refuted, they think that that false existence itself is either utter non-existence or implies utter utter non-existence, or that lack of true existence, that lack of inherent existence itself is truly existent. So here the Buddha has taught in such a way as to avoid falling into some kind of extreme. So here the sort of meaning of both of those things, true and false, are not established ultimately, as it says in this verse. And so by refuting this kind of true existence, it isn't as though that implies total non-existence, as in falsity equals there's nothing whatsoever, but nor is it the case that there is somehow a non-existence that is itself a truly existent phenomena, or that that lack of true existence is inherently established. And so here, the sort of fault that is being found by the opponent is in thinking that, okay, well, true and false are direct opposites, like in the sense that establishing one, it has to either be one or the other. Like when we have these mutually exclusive categories, something that is, like if we have a pillar and a non-pillar, those things are exhaustive and are direct in opposites. And so too, they think, well, here, if you are saying that phenomena lack true existence, then that would have to mean that they are utterly non-existent, as in they are false and therefore utterly non-existent. Or for them, they would think that, well, that non-existence, that lack of true existence itself has to be truly existent because of the kind of dualistic, these being in direct opposition to one another.
Oh, yeah. 그래서 다들 시합 참았어. 야, 다들 메다. 야, 안다마다 샤션입니다. 야, 다 안다가 샤션아. 쇼루가 시베도 들어서. 다다가 샤션아.
So, although we might have some more clarity to add to that later, we are out of time for now, so we will stop at this point.
Thank you so much, Gen Rinpoche, for these teachings. Nganzoning Tagne Kajinche. And also thank you so much, Katrina. And we, for our friends online, please look in the chat to find out how you might make an offering in gratitude for these teachings. And remember to look on the website for when our teachings will resume in December. So we'll conclude with some dedication prayers and a final mandala offering.
시바.
This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, for land, sun, and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Hiram Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
뭐야? 뭐ですか?
조진하게.
뭐야? 뭐야?
Recording stop.